Now, the latest from ITV News in the West Country with Jonty and Kylie Pentelow.
Hello and welcome to Monday's programme.
Coming up tonight between now and 6:30. As the International Climate Change Conference gets underway, we report from West communities under threat.
The concerns are long-term that we're going to lose more of the edge here at Leonard's Cove, and that's going to have an impact on our front line of our accommodation.
I'm on St Mary's and the Isles of Scilly, where rising sea levels and the increase in more extreme weather means some residents here are worried about the long-term future of this town.
Also on the programme this evening, rail services from Exeter faced disruption for days following a crash at Salisbury.
And Pride of Britain, Plymouth's Mark Ormrod wins the national award after raising more than £500,000 for charity.
Good evening. We are digging our own graves. That was the stark warning from the Secretary-General of the United Nations today.
As world leaders meet in Glasgow to try to come up with a plan to avert a global catastrophe, rising sea levels and extreme weather events are already changing the geography of the southwest.
In just the next 30 years, thousands of homes and businesses could be lost because of climate change. In a moment, we'll take a look at the areas most at risk. First, though, Richard Lawrence has been speaking to the people whose homes and livelihoods could be lost to the sea.
Who wouldn't want a front row position at Leonard's Cove Holiday Park? The views are glorious, but cracks have appeared in one of the chalets and the owners are already thinking about how and how far back to replace them.
The concerns are long-term that we're going to lose more of the edge here at Leonard's Cove, and that's going to have an impact on our front line of our accommodation. In the small time that we've been here, we have seen some bits of our debris and parts of our fascia down here on the clifftop accommodation. Yeah, parts of that have gone into the sea.
Every time there's a storm, it raises concerns. The owners have now commissioned their own survey to try to estimate just how many years the properties here have left right on the edge. While there may appear to be more land in front, plants and shrubs have slipped down too. But curiously, the top of the park may not be exempt from climate impacts either. The reception building bears the scars of 2 floods in the past 5 years that could be the result of more intense downpours.
We find that in really heavy rainfall that it does affect the springs that pop up here, there and everywhere, but especially the building behind me is that when we tend to find with heavy rainfall, the springs will fill up and just literally come up from under the ground.
A neighbour lost a large part of her garden too in recent years. The stretch of neighbouring coast is closely monitored by Plymouth University. Professor Gerd Masselink says Slapton, where the road had to be rebuilt 3 years ago after its partial destruction, is an example where it's sometimes difficult to distinguish between the impact of storms and rising sea levels. But both will play a part right around the West Country.
The impacts on the coast will definitely happen. We will have rising sea levels. We will have increased variability in the wave climate. And as a result, we will have increased coastal erosion and coastal flooding. Events that may happen maybe once every 100 years, like really high water levels and storm conditions, will increasingly happen. And they may become once in a 10-year event in the next 20, 30 years, and they may even become an annual event.
On the North Cornwall coast, Bude has been declared the most sensitive area in the UK to sea level rise. One of its famous landmarks will soon have to be moved. But the town has been given £200,000 of lottery funding to develop 12 projects to help everyone embrace the impact of climate change, from reducing plastic waste to flood prevention ideas.
It's for the community to be involved in that and to have ownership of the decision making. So that, we think, OK, so we're going to build a massive dune system maybe that will then act as the barrier. But, or do we do the wall, or do we try something else?
It's been another year of huge cliff falls around the West Country. From Cornwall to Dorset, no area is exempt. And no expert can predict what winter may have in store for us over the horizon. Richard Lawrence, ITV News.
Well, for coastal communities, the impact of sea levels rising could be devastating as cliffs continue to be battered by powerful and high waves. Well, as we look across the southwest, the areas in red are thought the most at risk in the next 30 years. However, from this map, we can see that while cliff collapses are becoming increasingly dramatic, the biggest impact on communities will be the flooding caused as low-level areas are hit by the rising seas. In Cornwall, homes and roads between Penzance and Marazion could be affected, as could many neighbourhoods in the Lance and Earth and Hale. Moving east, large parts of Parr, including the railway station, are predicted to be flooded. Well, we'll take a look at what could be happening in Devon, Dorset and Somerset in a moment. First, though, we can go live to Parr, where a project has begun to try to protect the 800 homes and businesses under threat from rising sea levels. Marina Jenkins is there for us. So, Marina, just what are they doing?
Well, it's a mix of repairing the current flood defence system, which is struggling to cope, and then adding in new reinforcement features along this stretch of the River Trefy and the River Parr. But it's a complex job because both Parr and St Blaise lie in a former estuary, and it's silted up over the centuries. So residents and businesses here have become all too familiar with overflooding drains and the rivers and canals overflowing as well. So this new and improved system really hopes to put an end to that.
The capacity of the canal and the river, which is just on the other side of the railway line behind me, is insufficient to carry the flow of water that is coming down the catchment. By expanding the capacity of the canal, this will enable the water to flow out to sea rather than bursting the canal and river banks and flowing into the businesses and properties surrounding it.
Well, that's how it works in practice, but I'm now joined by Pauline Giles, who's the councillor for St Blaise. Pauline, just how has this community been affected by flooding?
Well, I can remember in 1975 me being at the bottom of Parr Lane with my jeans rolled up over my knees wading through water. So this isn't something that's just happened in the last few years. In 2010 we were really badly hit and a lot of people had their houses flooded, and it was a terrible thing. So anything that's going to improve that has got to be good.
So why is this absolutely so vital for this community here?
For us to attract business here, we need to make sure that we can say that you're not going to get flooded out. And people own houses here that they can't get insurance for. They can't sell them and move on because they can't get the insurance. So, hopefully this is going to be the solution to it all.
All right then, well, thank you very much, Pauline. And this project is due to be complete by the autumn of next year. But for now, those that live and work here can feel assured that their community will very soon be better protected against flooding.
Marina, thank you very much. Well, back to how sea levels rising could affect Devon, Dorset and Somerset. In Plymouth, areas of the Hoe could be affected, as could a large number of homes along Plymouth Road in Lara. Elsewhere in Devon, many areas already regularly hit by flooding could see the situation get worse, including Kingstainton, Topsham and Clift St Mary. And on the north coast, communities in Westwood Hoe and Barnstaple could also be badly hit. Over in Dorset, cliff erosion is of course the biggest threat, but people living in Somerset could see sea levels rise, leading to huge areas in Bridgewater and Langport flooding. All in all, across our region, it's thought thousands of homes are under threat, along with the shape of our coastline that many take for granted.
Well, those startling predictions came from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who are playing a key role at COP26, where many of the world's leaders have gathered. Our political correspondent David Wood is there live in Glasgow for us this evening. David, it feels like these talks are crucial for many of us, particularly people living in the region along our coastlines.
Certainly, Jonty, and every world leader that showed up so far has not only wanted to show that they understand climate change, but they also get what they need to do to try and stop it from happening and, if you like, save the planet. But that will cost money, and that makes an agreement here very, very difficult to come by. Yes, all of the world leaders that are here in Glasgow believe that global temperatures should not increase by more than 1.5 degrees and understand they have a role in stopping that from happening. But it will be difficult to get that agreement. Boris Johnson already playing down expectations. But I have to say, wandering around here, there is still a lot of hope that some agreement will be done that will help save the world. Like any political conference, Glasgow's COP will generate a lot of hot air, as many of the world's most powerful people meet for talks. But cooling the planet down is the only item on the agenda, and the PM compares their role to James Bond, trying to save the world.
Except that the tragedy is, this is not a movie, and the doomsday device is real, and the clock is ticking.
Among those here putting pressure on politicians is Plymouth's Lewis Pugh. As the UN's patron of the oceans, he's swam long distance, raising the profile of pollution in our seas.
The speed of the climate crisis and the scale of it, I'm not sure that the world leaders are getting to grips with that. I've just come back from Greenland, where I've been doing a swim across the face of the fastest moving glacier in the world. It's moving at a speed of 40 meters per day. That matters.
The protesters here already have high expectations. So do many politicians, although Labour isn't confident the government is talking tough enough on climate change.
We're not going into it with the firmest of hands, nor the clearest of leadership. This conference needs to be a success, though. If we are to make sure that temperature rises do not exceed 1.5 degrees, we need the Prime Minister to step up. We need him to lead by example, which he hasn't been doing recently.
But ministers say this conference isn't unravelling and the government is talking business on climate change.
Everything we're doing in this country and as a government is backing up our ambitions globally. So, for example, we launched our net zero strategy and we've committed, this government is mobilising £26 billion worth of funding for green industry.
The leaders hope there'll be no stumbling blocks to solutions here, but the elbow bumping of international diplomacy must soon turn into agreement and action if Glasgow is to be a success. David Wood, ITV News.
Well, the Isles of Scilly are particularly exposed to the impact of climate change, not just because of predictions of sea levels rising, but also increasing summer temperatures and more intense storms.
Well, the latest data shows many communities across the islands could be at risk by 2050. The areas highlighted here in blue are expected to experience flooding in the coming decades, potentially cutting off parts of the island. So Max Walsh is in St Mary's for us and joins us live now. Max, just how worried are people there?
Well, Kylie, people are very worried because this could be the most affected part of the whole of the UK when it comes to rising sea levels. Now, behind me is Hewtown, and what makes this place so special is the fact that there is a beach on either side, and it only takes about a minute and a half to walk from one beach through the centre of town to the other. But as a result, it means it is very and can be very badly affected by storm surges when they come in. I've been speaking to people today who say they see a lot more flooding events right in the centre of town. And when you combine that with the fact that we are predicted to see rising sea levels for many more decades now, that's what gets people really concerned. Now, I spoke to a lady today who runs the local newsagent here, and she says if nothing is done at this big climate change summit, she's worried that for future generations, this place could disappear altogether. Touching down on St Mary's this morning, you can see hundreds of rocks and small islands. Experts say thousands of years ago this used to be one piece of land, but now only the highest points remain. Hewtown is sandwiched between two beaches, and people who live here are used to flooding. Avril runs the local newsagent, which has been in her family for more than a century, but she's worried what future generations may inherit.
Hewtown is very low, and I suppose if you're looking in probably to 100 years, Hewtown may not be.
While today the sea is relatively calm, storms like this one in 2014 can wash away the flood defences that are designed to protect residents. Councillor Steve Watt shows me the natural barriers at Pentelow Beach and tells me more than £4 million is being spent this winter to bolster defences.
We're at the foreground of a battleground of weather systems from not just the Atlantic but the Irish Sea and the English Channel. We're at the junction, and so we're vulnerable from 360 degrees.
In terms of the flood defences, do you think the council is doing enough?
I think it's enough for the time being, but I mean, as long as COP26 works, then it should be enough for the next few years.
At the Mermaid Inn, locals and holidaymakers are enjoying a lunchtime pint metres from the water. But many are worried about the changes that could come if sea levels continue to rise.
It only needs to rise a little bit before it could sort of encroach, really.
Sea levels I haven't really noticed too much, but around like Pentelow area, all the paths and stuff, they're all falling down as well now.
And what will the people on Scilly do? Do you know what I mean? There's people, you know, that go back generations and generations and generations.
But climate change expert Dr. Rob Barnett from the University of Exeter explains to me that the Isles of Scilly simply won't disappear.
Even under severe climate scenario, 1 metre of sea level rise, the islands will remain, but the low-lying part of the islands, and particularly those areas that are exposed to storms, we will expect to see some coastal changes in the future.
What those changes look like depends on how far we alter our way of life before the true impact of climate change is felt on these shores. Max Walsh, ITV News.
Well, in recent years, we've had major heat waves, the UK's first ever red snow warning, and many intense storms that have led to big floods.
Let's take you live to Charlie. He's at the Met Office in Exeter for us this evening. So, Charlie, what are they doing there to both prevent and predict the impact of climate change?
Well, a lot of things really. There's more than 100, well over 100 Met Office climate scientists in the Hadley Centre here, and they're looking at how the climate's going to change from anything from 10 years to 100 years or more in the future, changing the starting conditions ever so slightly, seeing what those predictions will give us, and the results really are there to help us people plan against what might happen. So not necessarily preventing it, but giving us the best possible armament, if you like, to find out what could help us with events such as these.
Nick, thanks very much again. That's all from Glasgow for now, so it's goodbye from us. We will be back at 10 for the latest of the COP26 summit, and we'll be looking again at the challenges facing the negotiators in the 12 days to come. But now on BBC One, it's time to join our news teams. Welcome.
Events like that sometimes make it difficult for us to see what we could possibly do to change that, but it's not all doom and gloom. Joining me now is Dr. Rosie Oakes, who is a Met Office climate scientist. Thanks so much for joining us. Climate science is a huge umbrella, so just paint a picture a bit more about what exactly you do here.
Yeah, so I work in international climate services, which means we work with partners from around the world, and we talk to them about how they're being affected by climate change, and then take the data from the Met Office and provide that to them in a way that they can use it to help them make decisions.
So, and that in itself is a huge international thing. So it is easy for people to see why it feels a bit futile sometimes. What can I do as a person when there's so much going on? But I don't necessarily think that's true. I think there are things people can do. What's your take on it?
So the climate system is big and complex, and it can feel really overwhelming. But I think one really interesting thing is we can see this clear link between the amount of carbon we put in the atmosphere and the amount of warming we see. So every small bit of carbon you can keep out of the atmosphere, that reduces the warming and reduces the impact of climate change.
And these things are kind of small. They can be, can't they? So, you know, for example, getting to work can be a different thing.
Yeah, so for example, one way I'm cutting down my carbon footprint is I start cycling to work instead of driving. So every day I cycle, I'm not putting that carbon in the atmosphere that would have come from driving to work. So people can make individual changes in their own lives, and everyone can do something different. So keep talking about it and making those changes.
Thank you so much. We will do, and I'll bring you the weather as well at the end of the programme.
OK, Charlie, for now, thank you. Well, there will be much more from the COP26 summit on the national news after us. Mary Nightingale is in Glasgow this evening.
Coming up, we're live in Glasgow as the COP26 climate conference gets underway. Boris Johnson warns of the need to act now while Joe Biden makes a new pledge to cut emissions. Sir David Attenborough warns leaders to think about the young. And even the soaps get in on the act. We're on the set of Corrie and Emmerdale to hear how they are talking climate change. Well, do join me for that and the rest of the day's news at 6:30.
But But first, other news from across the region, and 8 decisions to return gun licences have been overturned in a countrywide review following a mass shooting in Plymouth. Jake Davidson killed 5 people in Keam in August before turning the gun on himself. His shotgun certificate was suspended following an allegation of assault, but was then returned. From today, police have to check an individual's medical history before issuing a gun licence.
Torquay United has made an official complaint to the Football Association and National League after its fans had objects thrown at them during Saturday's match at Wrexham. Rival supporters reportedly hurled bottles and coins at goals fans after the team equalised. Welsh Club says it's working with police to identify those responsible. Now, rail disruption between the southwest and London is expected to continue for several days after a train crash near Salisbury last night.
The driver suffered life-changing injuries and dozens of passengers needed treatment. Well, for more on this, Robert Murphy is live at Salisbury Station for us tonight. Robert, many of those passengers were heading to our region.
Yes, they were terrifying moments, not just for the driver, but of course for those passengers, many of whom were heading to our region. One of the saving graces was that the trains were heading into the approach to Salisbury. They'd slowed down, so the impact was reduced. Tonight, the line remains closed. Investigations have started. No fewer than 5 separate inquiries. Those inquiries will take many months to continue, a long time for something that happened like that. Here's Derek Johnson.
2 trains collide. A driver is trapped and seriously injured. Passengers hurt as well. Those on board are walked to safety and treated for their wounds. Many today remain shocked and dazed.
We were travelling quite slowly, but then there was this sudden impact and a lot of juddering and possessions being thrown around the carriage, and the sense that the carriage might be turning over.
Do you feel quite lucky?
Very fortunate that the train was travelling slowly. Yes, if it had been at greater speed, then things could have been a lot worse.
We heard an explosion. Well, not an explosion, it was like a firework. It was like 4 fireworks. Being firework night, we thought it must be just fireworks going off. Yeah. It wasn't until we went back inside the house, we heard the police helicopter hovering above the house. It was awful.
Just after 5 o'clock last night, a GWR service from Portsmouth Harbour to Bristol Temple Meads partially derailed in the Fisherton Tunnel on its approach to Salisbury Station. That derailment knocked out signalling in the area. The train was then hit from behind by the 5:20 South Western Railway service from London Waterloo. Around 100 people were evacuated, mostly walking wounded, but 14, including the driver, were taken to hospital. He has life-changing injuries.
We are keeping an open mind, but at this early stage, there has been nothing to suggest the train struck an object or that there was any significant delay between the trains colliding and then one derailing. This has been a large-scale, multi-agency operation.
Safety is something we take tremendously seriously on the railway, and in the UK we have one of the safest railways in Europe, but events like this clearly serve potentially to undermine that. So we want to understand what's happened, why, and learn lessons.
Our focus at the moment now is to ensure that all the customers affected and our colleagues are supported over the coming days, and also that we support our customers because the rail service is now going to be closed in this area for a few days. We're not sure how long, so we need to ensure that we give people as much information as possible.
Engineers and investigators have been at the scene all day. The task of removing the trains and the debris from the tracks could take some time.
Derek Johnson reporting there. Now, former Royal Marine Mark Ormerod is back home in the West Country after winning the National Pride of Britain Award at a lavish ceremony in London.
The triple amputee won the accolade after raising more than £500,000 for a veterans charity through his feats of endurance. And when I spoke to Mark at his home in Plymouth a little earlier today, I asked whether it had all sunk in yet.
Yeah, it's still quite surreal hearing that, but huge honour to be selected and nominated and to win. You know, it's been a phenomenal weekend.
We've been very lucky here in the West Country. We've had several winners in the past, and one thing they always say is that they can't quite believe they've won because they're surrounded by amazing people, and I guess that was the case for you on Saturday night as well.
Absolutely. 17 of us descended from all over the country on the hotel. We didn't meet until the morning, and we sat in a room at the back of the hotel and watched a 20-minute video which was detailing everybody's story, and some of them were heartbreaking. Some of the stories that I saw were real heartbreakers.
Just talk me through what it's like to be part of. I've never been to the Pride of Britain Awards, but I see everyone walking up the red carpet. There are celebrities all over the place, and in a way they're kind of all there for people like you.
Yeah, and that's really humbling actually, when you walk up that red carpet and then you go into the venue and you look left and you look right, and there's everyone from, you know, pop stars to YouTube stars to footballers and singers and movie stars. You know, Sharon Stone was there. It's just phenomenal to think that they're all there for this great cause, and they've given up their time to be there with you.
Yeah, and your son would have been pretty jealous because you had a selfie with former Arsenal goalkeeper David Seaman, so I think he'll be pretty impressed with that. And I think this is probably fair to say, going to those awards, the recognition that you've had is beyond anything you expected when you started out with the goal of raising £1,000 just a few months ago.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've said this before, this whole year was unplanned. The goal was £1,000, but the main objective was to get eyeballs on the charity's website to help people understand the mission and help to spread the word. And then things just snowballed.
It's time we took a well-earned rest, but we are going to keep watching to see what you've got in the pipeline next. It doesn't sound like Ben's going to give you too much of a breather. Mark, from all of us, congratulations. We'll catch up again soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, there'll definitely be something to come, won't there? Just a reminder that you can see Mark Ormerod being presented with his Pride of Britain Award by Dame Joan Collins this Thursday on ITV at 8 o'clock.
Here, though, it is weather time again. Let's take you back to Charlie at the Met Office this evening. Charlie, we had a bit of a wet end to October, didn't we? How's November looking?
Yeah, it was wetter and milder than average as well for October, and this first little chunk of November's turned out to be, well, pretty chilly. It's certainly cold up here on the roof and quite showery as well, and none of this forecasting or climate science would be available without this place. And the solar panels you can see behind me, well, they contribute to powering it, which is 100% renewable energy, I might add, including the supercomputer, which for a building this size is some feat, isn't it? But yes, it is all important to give you this forecast for the next few days. This next week then is a bit quieter than last week. We had some pretty wild weather, didn't we? Quite a showery start, but a drier end. It is, though, feeling quite cold. Bit breezy at times, some chilly nights to come later this week as well. The Atlantic shows a big area of low pressure. It's out towards the northern half of the UK. That's what brought us those pretty heavy fronts over the weekend. Today and tomorrow, something a bit more showery. You might just be able to see to the left-hand side of your screen a little bit of high pressure building in. That will quieten things down, more especially for Thursday and Friday. But for the rest of this evening, we've still got a couple of showers around. They're still pretty heavy, but they are thinning out and they'll become more confined to probably northern coasts of Devon, Cornwall, Somerset. The Isles of Scilly still seeing their fair share through tonight as well. Elsewhere, some clear skies and some low temperatures down to maybe 3 or 4 degrees, perhaps away from towns and cities. So yeah, a noticeable chill first thing on Tuesday morning. Bit of early sunshine, but those showers won't take too long to work their way back inland again. Some heavy, some with hail, maybe a bit of thunder mixed in. Not moving quite as quickly. The wind's not quite as strong tomorrow, so downpours will last a bit longer, but so will the sunshine between. It just won't feel that warm. Highs of 12 or 13 Celsius again. Some moderate seas tomorrow, high tide between around 2 and 5 in the morning, and again during the early parts of the afternoon. And then for the rest of the week, well, a couple of showers perhaps on Wednesday, but as that high pressure starts to build in, the weather will become a little bit quieter. So something drier on Thursday and Friday, perhaps a bit more cloud as we head through towards the end of the week. The daytime temperatures will stay a little bit on the low side. We could even see a bit of frost by Thursday and Friday night.
Charlie, thank you. That's it from all of us. I'll have the late news at 10:30.
Now I'll hand you to Mary Nightingale in Glasgow as the ITV News continues. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.